Well, in 2 hours' time, the president is poised to address the nation on immigration reform. He has threatened to use his executive powers that would free millions of undocumented workers from the threat of deportation. This as Republicans vow to take action if the president moves ahead on that promise. What could this mean for America, and is it what the voters want? And we will head to Ferguson, Missouri, where the grand jury is set to come down with a decision surrounding Officer Darren Wilson's fate as early as tomorrow. This as the National Guard remains on standby if the city erupts into violence following the decision. Plus, more tensions in East Ramapo, New York, where the state-appointed fiscal monitor has come out with a scathing report accusing the school board of mismanaging state funds. Why he's comparing the situation in East Ramapo to Brown versus the Board of Ed. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us. And tonight, we begin with a look at immigration reform. And as I said, in just 2 hours, at 8 o'clock, the president will deliver a message to the nation. It's an issue the president campaigned on way back in 2008, but now it looks like he's ready to take action. This is President Obama's message. If you are here illegally but have stayed out of trouble, the federal government will leave you alone.
What I'm going to be laying out is the things that I can do with my lawful authority as president to make the system work better.
That includes temporary legal status but not citizenship for more than 5 million undocumented immigrants. Almost all of them, 4.1 million, are the parents and families of U.S. citizens who've been here in the U.S. for more than 5 years and have no criminal record, removing the threat of deportation.
All of a sudden they could be separated from you because I'm here and this is my home, but they're not legal.
The president is also expanding his program from 2 years ago to include 300,000 more undocumented immigrants who were brought here illegally. A September ABC News Washington Post poll found that a majority of Americans supported President Obama taking action without Congress. But when asked about extending legal status and work permits, a majority were opposed. Republicans say the president is going way beyond his powers.
Imposing his will unilaterally may seem tempting. It may serve him politically in the short term, but he knows it will make an already broken system even more broken.
Again, millions of undocumented workers would be impacted by the president's actions, and the president's executive action plans may allow up to 5 million immigrants in the U.S. illegally to stay and obtain work permits. The measures would continue to strengthen border security, streamline legal immigration, focus on earned citizenship, and crack down on employers who hire people who are undocumented. And an overwhelming number of Americans believe that undocumented immigrants should be allowed to stay in the U.S. legally. 71% say yes, while a quarter of the respondents said no. I want to bring in our panel here tonight to talk about this. Richard Brodsky, former Democratic New York State Assemblyman, and now a senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU. Bill O'Reilly, as we say, the good one, Republican strategist who served as Rob Astorina's spokesman in his 2 successful runs for Westchester County exec. Gary Pretlow, New York State Assemblyman, representing New York's 89th district here, former colleague of Richard. He still came. Chris Canabillas, if I said it right, I'm sorry,
Cabanillas.
Okay, easy for you to say. Owner of Cabanillas and Associates law firm. He's also considered a liaison between the business and Hispanic community. He deals regularly with Hispanics who are not citizens. He also currently, and also many of these folks living in the shadows. And Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. And Dominic has a really interesting piece that'll tie into the Ferguson story coming up. But let me start with you, Chris, and put a human face on this, because we hear the numbers, whether it's 4.1 million, 5 million. We talk about the various poll numbers, but talk about who these people are. And if you could, obviously without divulging any privacies, put a human face on it.
The human face on it is one that we see every single day. Every single one of us meets and interacts with these people every single day, whether you're on the subway, going to get a cup of coffee, you're going to get your local paper that morning, whether it's somebody who's perhaps babysitting one night for you, maybe it's somebody who's cleaning your office. We see them every single day. And what's happened historically for years is that these people have been amongst us, but unfortunately have been living in the shadows. And finally, with this great, tremendous announcement that's going to come out tonight, what we expect the president to do with the deferred action extension is to allow these people to have a chance to actually live amongst us, to get work permits, to actually raise their families, to have an opportunity for a better life, and not just be left to handle the cleanup work, but to actually have a future here in the United States.
All right. Again, so we clear it up for the folks at home. They're not getting basically the citizenship papers as we understand what the president's going to say tonight. They're going to be allowed to stay, but there has to be qualifications, right?
Absolutely.
They got to have family members that are here. They've got to be here for more than 5 years. They had to have kept their nose clean. They're going to have to come forward. They're going to have to pay processing fees here just to be basically in the chute. And they're going to have to prove that they don't have any felony convictions whatsoever, and there's other hurdles as well, right?
That's correct, and the overwhelming majority of them are going to be able to do that very easily because they have been working amongst us. And a lot of the negative talk I see is that people are thinking the worst of these people. And the reality is that they're hardworking people that just want to live amongst us. And finally, they're going to be able to get working papers, get better jobs, and actually start to pay taxes. Believe it or not, they actually want to pay taxes.
And if they are a thug, if they've got a record, they're going to get deported.
Well, they're certainly not going to be applying. I would imagine that.
Okay. How many of these people, for some people say, what's the difference? They're not going to become citizens. Why are we now basically glorifying giving these folks amnesty? What's the difference? How many of them worried that 2 days ago, before this conversation, were worried about getting deported tomorrow?
All the time. People worry. They can't. There's prohibitions every time that they're trying to travel. They're worried about that. Okay, lots of them, the majority of them, are parents of citizens. So their kids, they want to provide and help their kids to have a better future. They're unable to. They're unable to. And now they're going to be able to work and actually get work permits and actually apply for better jobs. Before, there was a very hard ceiling as to how far they could improve and go up to get different higher paying jobs, and now they're finally going to be able to. Big
Gary,
news.
in your office, how constituents knocking on doors, how often is this the subject here about who's allowed to be, who's not allowed to be here, what can they do, what can't they do?
Well, I haven't had too many of them coming through, but in my Yonkers part of my district, it is a serious issue, and this definitely will be a benefit to all of these people because, like Chris said, they are hardworking. They want to be here. There's a passion. I'm a sponsor of the, or co-sponsor of the DREAM Act in the state legislature. Right now, people go to school and then they can't get jobs. Correct. And they're afraid, of their parents being deported. What we're assuming the president is going to say will take away a lot of those fears and let people to come out of the shadows, to come into the forefront and become productive citizens of the United States.
And we know there are some things that will not be, or at least we expect will not be, including Dreamers. That will not be probably included in tonight's executive order by the president. We also know that they won't be eligible for to be participating in the Affordable Care Act, as well as food stamps and other social safety nets. This is not full citizenship. This just means that if you got a family, you have roots here, and you've stayed out of trouble, you're on the path and you don't have to worry about somebody knocking on the door and sending you back to wherever you came from, right?
That's correct, but let's not take for granted just the importance of simply being able to apply for a driver's license. These are people who have the money to and want to go and pay whatever they need to the registration to go get a car, and they haven't been able to for years. So now they're finally be able to do that.
Could we just talk about like a little common sense here? We're talking about people who circumvented the law. I mean, I went to an immigration graduation yesterday, naturalization service. There were 121 people in White Plains that raised their hand and swore to the Constitution of this country and did it the right way. I mean, let's just like put that on the table before we start.
Definitely.
These are
I was
good
going to get
people,
into that next time, but let's
people.
get into it now.
I know some of these people. They're very good people, but they circumvented the law. I think we need to establish that for starters. Also, in New York State, you're going to have 300,000 new people going on Medicaid rolls at the same time when you have a 2% tax cap on municipalities. So you're going to be driving up costs massively in the next couple of years, but you've got a cap. So what's going to happen? You're going to have to cut services all over the place.
Well, let me
it's
break
going
this
to have an
into two
impact
parts.
on New
Let's
York.
do the economic
Right.
second. But Chris, what about the argument? I'm sure you got a lot of people who right now have formally applied for citizenship. They've gotten work visas or whatever. Are they saying, wait a minute, these guys basically cut the line? Or why am I not getting rewarded for doing it the right way? Is there a legitimate argument that some of the same folks that work on the same jobs as these other folks did it the right way, and the people who didn't, or as he said, circumvent the system, are being rewarded for not.
Well, Richard, these are totally apples and oranges. I mean, to get actual residency here provides a lot of other rights that what we expect to happen this evening is not going to be the same. So this is simply just coming out of the shadows, getting the basic opportunity to work, apply for licenses, really the basic things. I mean, let's not go crazy and think that this is full amnesty. This is anything but that.
I'm a strong believer in full amnesty. I'm a strong believer in a pathway to citizenship. I say that because it falls upon me to say to both sides, you're both overstating what the president's doing. It is not a pathway to citizenship. It is not a full amnesty. Hold on.
I like a pathway to citizenship.
Right. That's a nice change. Oh, no,
Okay.
is it a change?
No, it's not a change.
Okay, well, it's a surprise.
Yeah.
This is a very limited action by the president, and it ought to be understood by that. It's an exercise of prosecutorial discretion. What he's really saying is, as the chief law enforcement officer of the country, I can choose how to decide which cases are prosecuted and which cases are not. If the kids are citizens and the parents are here, we're not going to prosecute. That opens up other things.
And just
to be
give
true,
an analogy, if
but
I
that's
could, for the
all-
audience, and I thought this was made today, is pretty good. It's not dissimilar to how the federal government chooses, in effect, not to prosecute in Colorado and Washington State, where they basically legalized marijuana. Technically, the feds could say, nope, this federal law, we're going to go in. They're choosing not to. They're choosing to take a wait-and-see approach. In this particular case, the president's making it clear that, and it is limited, it's not a law. The next president could just remove it without even going through Congress, conceivably.
One other point.
Yep.
The Congress has only provided enough funds to prosecute 400,000 of the 12 million cases. Now the president's saying, all right, I'm going to choose the 400,000, and they're all yelling. There will be a political tumult about this.
And we're going to get into that
But
next
in
segment.
the end, this is really simple stuff. The Republicans are lemming-like marching off the cliff politically. Keep going.
Do we have time? Do we have time, Richard?
Well, it doesn't matter because he chose to go where we weren't going to go in the segment. Anyway, but go ahead.
I mean, President Obama is a constitutional scholar. 22 times he said that he doesn't have the power to do this.
And you know what?
Anybody afraid of President Obama?
I'm going to try and
22
regain
times.
this thing here, okay? We're going to play
What
the
doing
clip
that?
of what the president said. Then they can fight here. But I'm not going to drag poor Chris into this mudfest here. Chris, thank you very much for putting a face in this. Thank you. Okay. And again, everybody, head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question here tonight. As it relates to immigration reform, do you support or oppose the president's move to take executive action? Okay, and again, at 8 p.m. here, we're going to have that address on FiOS 1 News. You can check it out. Again, you'll see it in its entirety. Again, that's coming at 8. But coming up next, we'll continue our discussion on immigration reform, and this is fraught with politics. We'll talk about this. I'll show you one poll. I'll show you another poll where the public may not be too crazy about how the president's going about doing these changes and whether this is smart or he's going to regret this move politically going forward. We'll talk about that and much more after this.
You can't blame people for wanting to have a better life. You sure as the world cannot blame a parent for wanting their child to have a better life. Every parent, we were just discussing that, every parent wants that for their child. We have a problem with how it's being done and how our local resources are being used without our knowledge to take care of these individuals when we have individuals in our own community that are going without.